Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I am so excited today to interview a long-term friend and someone who I really respect in the industry. She's a PhD researcher, independent scholar, and her book is entitled Women and Martial Art in Japan. She's been a national coach of the Australian men's and women's Kendo team in 2015 to 2018, and also the head coach of the Swedish women's national Kendo team from 2021 to 2024. She's also been a coach and player herself 8 times at the Kendo World Championships. So Kate, without further ado, can't wait to talk to you about so many things. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on your show.
And of course, big shout out to Damien Carmody-Stevens, Damo, who is the person who introduced us many, many years ago, and just such a wonderful coach. I've got so many one-liners. I always think of Damo in my coaching. So just wanted to give him a big shout out for introducing us. And look, straight away, I'll kick it off with asking our pattern break question. What do you like to eat for breakfast on a Sunday morning, Kate?
Pancakes. Swedish pancakes.
Swedish, I was just about to ask. What makes them so good? What makes them so tasty?
Oh, they're like crepes, but thin. So you can put lots of cream and fresh blueberries and raspberries and
nice
maple syrup and a bit of everything.
Nice.
It's a nice family thing we do here.
Yeah, that's super awesome. All right, well, the Pancake Girl, tell me straight off the bat, what is Kendo for those maybe who are still unfamiliar with the sport? Let's start there.
Okay, so Kendo is a traditional Japanese martial art that derived from the samurai in medieval Japan. But over several hundreds of years, it's developed into a martial art that's mainly practiced in the education system in Japan. And it's a way to also cultivate, students use it to cultivate themselves. So to develop cultural characteristics such as etiquette, perseverance. So it's just not the martial arts, it's much bigger than that, the physical. It's also a way to cultivate character, which is why it's so popular outside of Japan as well. So I think there are over 1 million practitioners in Japan, and around the world it's very popular now. So it's the martial arts where you wear full armor, a helmet, padding, and these beautiful long pants called hakama that my daughter thinks that I'm wearing a skirt. She never sees me in a skirt. She's like, Mommy, why are you wearing a skirt today? They're pants. Yes. So it's people associate it with fencing, but it's quite different, obviously. But the mask looks similar, but of course the outfit and the philosophy and principles are quite different.
Yeah. So I have to say, one of the first times that I watched Kendo, I couldn't believe at the end of this battle where you're just going at each other, and then there was such respect. It's almost like it instilled in me a philosophy as a coach where I was very, like, I would then teach kids to be grateful for the other person playing their best. Okay, whereas sometimes in tennis, I was hoping maybe someone would double fault if I needed a cheap point, right? There was this really huge respect for your opponent. You've both left nothing to chance. You put your sweat out there, and then you're grateful and you're thanking each other. That's one of the character traits that I really resonated with. What are some of the other amazing things, and what's your reflection on what I just said?
Yeah, I think it's actually quite important that you do have respect for each other because it can be quite dangerous if you don't. So, of course, you don't want to hit people off the targets or injure people, because if you did overuse force, you could.
Yep.
But I think, so you're quite spot on, actually. But I think a big appeal of Kendo is, of course, the opportunity to compete, because it's a very exciting experience, and nothing exists outside of that moment when you're competing. And it's the thrill. I'm sure if you spoke to many Kendo people who compete, it's just such a thrill. And when you score a point, you can hear the crowd and people clapping and cheering.
Yep.
But I think a big appeal is that you can actually develop yourself through Kendo. And I think for me personally, it's been a really good way to develop my confidence. And a lot of the movements that you do, actually, it's not just hitting each other with sticks. It's the way that you compete with another person. Like, you have to apply pressure, and it's risk taking, and you need confidence to step forward and to take that risk to hit when you might be hit. So there's many, many, many wonderful things, but that's the main thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like a dance as well, isn't it? It's the
Yes.
flow of energy between two people.
Yes.
That really resonates with me as well. Let's go back to you as a high school exchange student in Japan. Training, obviously, it's the first time you started to play Kendo. Take me back to, teenage Kate. And what were you thinking at that time in terms of what you wanted to do with your life and your experience in Japan culturally with regards to this sport of Kendo?
Yeah, so I was a high school exchange student, and I'd actually become really homesick after I'd been there for 6 months. And all the students do high school after-school activities. And I remember just walking on my way home thinking, where is everybody? And that most of them are doing either a martial art or mostly sports, actually. And then I just happened to come across Kendo. I heard people, it was a small, it's like a shed, actually. People were screaming and stomping and this loud crashing of the bamboo swords. Kendo is very noisy, and that's what makes it really exciting. And I remember seeing Kendo and just thinking, oh, wow, that's so cool. I want to try that. So I was able to try it, and I just really enjoyed the movement, because I played rugby and all these other sports considered boy sports. And I was living in New Zealand at the time, before I went to Japan. And there was always some kind of stigma attached to me doing these boys' sports. But with Kendo, there was, even though I wouldn't find out till later, it's a man's physical culture. And it's just really welcoming. And there are other females practicing, and actually females dominated the class. There were 7 of us and 2 boys. And it's just really fun to hit each other. Not really, I didn't really know what I was doing, but that it was really a lot of fun. And the first time I'd actually made female friends through sport. So I think that was a big appeal for me.
Fantastic. I love that. All right. So fast forward, and your career, I was looking at your website. I mean, Kate's written a couple of articles. That's me being sarcastic, and journals and books. So let's go to your book, Women and Martial Art in Japan, delves into the identity politics of Kendo. What are some of the most surprising insights that you discovered about women's experiences in this traditionally male-dominated sport?
Well, for me, I'd always known how amazing women's Kendo was in Japan, but I think outside of Japan, there's not much access to women Kendo practitioners. It's mainly male teachers, and people don't really know what's happening with women's Kendo in Japan. And I think it's the most inspired I've ever felt, training with really high-level women who are just so much better than me. But of course, because of women's status and the hierarchical system in Kendo, we don't get as much access. So I think through my research, of course, I wanted to discover why I was so drawn to Kendo and why I felt so inspired training with high-level Japanese women. But also I wanted to share with the world that women train just as hard as men. They invest just as much as men. But unfortunately, the status isn't as high, so they don't have as many opportunities. They don't get paid as much. And of course, there are no women with the highest level of 8th black belt yet, but that's coming. But there's things that are slowly starting to change, but I think it was really important for me to do the ethnographic research in Japan for 18 months. I trained every day with people that were half my age and twice as fast. But I really wanted to share with the world just how amazing these women are and that they invest just as much as men.
So what comes up for me is representation in what you said. As cliche as it sounds, if you can see it, you can be it.
Well, exactly. You need role models to strive towards being that. And if you can't see it, you don't think it's a possibility. So that was actually another big reason for writing the book. It changed my life. It was such an amazing experience that these women let me into their lives too, you know.
When people finish reading the book, what's the one thing you'd love them to walk away with?
I think to understand that how we perceive women's kendo and women's status in Japan doesn't reflect the reality. So even though women do have a lower status in sports and kendo in general, it doesn't mean that they're subordinate or weak. They learn how to navigate and negotiate the system and still make the most out of the opportunities they do have. And the female bonds are very strong. So many of the women stay friends for all of their life, which is really special. And they practice kendo for decades together. So
yeah.
But I think so women are, they may not have equal status, but they're still quite powerful.
Fantastic. You've coached both national teams, both in Australia and Sweden. So in doing that and bringing teams together, and both the men's and the women's team, first of all, how did you do that?
It's a really good question. Thank you. I've been looking forward to talking about this actually, because I haven't had a chance to really talk about it yet. So when I became coach of the men's and women's national team, a woman had not done it before, and it's not very common in international kendo, and it's a bit different from other sports because I know now there's more women coaching American football teams, ice hockey, but I think in kendo it's very important that the head coach is better than most of the players, or they're a man, basically, because they fit the archetype of what a kendo coach or a kendo teacher is. And I mean, when I took on the role, I only wanted to coach the women actually, but I couldn't find somebody who was able to work with me as the men's coach, so I had to do both. And then I appointed a wonderful male coach who helped me coach both. It's Daniel Jung. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. He was very supportive. We worked really well together. But I had comments from a Japanese teacher saying, people are going to think there's something wrong with Australian kendo because there's a woman coaching the men's team. And I was like, right, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Great motivation.
Yeah, so it was difficult being a woman. I didn't fall into the trap of trying to prove myself to be inauthentic, trying to be somebody that I wasn't. I couldn't be better than all of the male members. I could compete with some of them, but there was one in particular who he didn't trust me, or he didn't cooperate. And actually he started to bully me a little bit. So I cut him from the team. He was the best player, but he's really disruptive he's disrupting the team dynamic. And then after that, we all came together as a team. And at the World Kendo Championships, Australia won their first bronze medal. The women won bronze medal. And that was actually the teamwork. So the men really helped the women prepare. And we really worked together as a team. And I think that was my strength, was bringing us together and showing that I really cared for each of the members. So I tried to draw on my strengths of being a caring person and interested and trying to tap into what they wanted to achieve through the process, which I think I follow what you not believe in, but I think it was quite similar. Like every now and then I would draw on some of your posts in your social media to take that into coaching.
Caring coach, being a caring coach. Do you think that coaches can learn that, or is it something that they have naturally?
I think some people have it naturally, and I don't think you have to be a woman to have it. I think it's quite difficult though, because especially in martial arts, a lot of people don't want to think about emotions. They just want to shut that off and focus. And with some of the athletes, they didn't want me to be a caring coach. They didn't want to talk about their feelings because they had a lot of other things going on in their life. So I had to respect that. And I tried to tap into what they needed me to be and while maintaining my authenticity. And some of the women as well, actually. So it was quite refreshing for some men that they felt they were able to talk about their feelings and what was happening for them and stress of preparing and competing the World Championships. But I think people can definitely develop empathy in caring coaching. And I think it's very important because in some sports of some countries, I mean, you'll go to these World Championships and there's no chance, realistically, that you'll win a medal.
Yep.
So what are people going to get out of what they invest? You know, you have to provide a bigger picture for them, which I think was something, because I've always seen competitive kendo that way. So I was able to foster that in some of the athletes.
As the national coach, did you have to treat the Swedish team different to the Australian team because of anything culturally, or?
It's really interesting. Before I moved to Sweden 5 years ago, I'd been to 7 World Championships already. But when I came here, I was nobody. So I have a reputation. My wife was on the Swedish national team previously, so people knew who I was. But I had to start afresh. And because I'd known most of the Australian team for many, many years, they knew me, but the Swedish team, they didn't know me and they didn't really trust me. So it took a few years to develop a rapport. I almost got there, but it takes, culturally, Australia and Sweden are quite different. I think it takes a bit more time to establish rapport with Swedish people. Yeah.
And build that trust. All right. So
yes.
In 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach?
I think self-reflexivity, authenticity, and risk-taking.
Please expand.
So I have 2 examples, and one I talked about earlier about one of the male athletes that I had an issue with. So I had the choice to be authentic or inauthentic, try to be somebody that I wasn't, to try to get him to respect me, which I knew was a dead end and distracting, actually, from my coaching. And I had to spend a lot of time thinking about this, what the best approach was, and also trust or become clear of what my strengths were, and then I had to focus on that. And risk taking was I cut the strongest person from the team, but it ended up being a positive thing because the team came together. And I think if I hadn't have done that, it may have been a different outcome at the World Championships, but I don't know that. But,
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So tell me about, being a player and a coach. You got to take care of, how do you balance sort of that, your leadership responsibilities and your own personal development?
I guess I retired a little before my time because there was a need to have a coach that would lead the team, leading from some kind of positive succession from Damien Carmody-Stevens and then Brett Smith and then myself. I felt there needed to be a very good intention and natural progression from what had started to lead on. So I'd always used competitive kendo to develop myself, and I was able to use coaching as that as well because I hadn't completely achieved what I wanted to as a competitor. So I just switched that into when I was coach. And I think for me, it's just the self-actualization. I think everybody has something about it, like who am I? What can I really be? How can I really bring out the best in people? How can I bring out the best in myself? And I'm sure I see you nodding. So it's a long journey, and it takes many campaigns to get there. So it's quite a shame when people stop coaching after one campaign or one world championship or championships, because there's so much work to do with self-reflexivity and self-improvement. And I'm a bit self-critical, so it's always like, oh, I could have done that, I should have done that, I'll do that next time.
Yeah. I love that.
So,
My two favorite words: next time. What am I going to do differently next time?
Yes.
So I mean, you really advocate for personal development through coaching, don't you?
Well, I think it always comes down to preparation and delivery. So when you're at having a plan leading up to competitions and being very clear about the strategies and the techniques and things, having that plan. But I think the biggest challenge is delivering that on competition day. So being confident and being clear and seeing your athletes and feeling their emotions and not being blindsided by thinking you just have to be this really strong person and be really clear and just tell them what to do. And because it's interesting because I thought I had finally stepped into that, and then I had an athlete recently who I wasn't able. I just felt like I was too strong, and I said to her, "Am I coaching you in the right way?" And that was a big risk for me because I wasn't sure how she was going to respond. And she said, "Actually, how you coach me doesn't suit me." And I was like, "Oh, God, oh really? So how can you please tell me how can I better coach you?" And so we talked and we worked through it. And that was a little bit difficult because I had to take a back step because I thought I had arrived at a really good way to coach, but I had to take a back step for her. And that had actually is a very, very good development opportunity to also understand for myself, you don't always have to be hard and clear. You can be soft and clear and gentle with people if they need it. So she really appreciated that, and we had a closer rapport and connection, and she performed well at the World Championships. So.
You know, this has come up a lot for me recently around the concept of asking a simple question is like, how would you like to be coached? How do you learn best? Sometimes we make these assumptions about what people need, and we think that we're, yes, we have to be able to read beyond the spoken word, but there's something in the simplicity of just saying, well, how often would you like feedback? How do you like to receive feedback? And tapping into that is something that I think we need to do more. What are your thoughts?
Because I do follow your post, and I think I remember reading something about that. And it's all these little words and things along the way. It's amazing that these things have just popped up. I mean, I think I remember reading one of your. So it's really important. And it's also important to understand that I've had some female athletes that want me to be like military don't talk to me about emotions or feelings or see me or ask if I'm okay. Just train me hard. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try. Because you have to try, but to a point. I mean, you still have to be yourself.
Authentic.
Authentic, and I didn't really feel comfortable being like a sergeant. So with that athlete, actually, I wasn't really able to coach her because I couldn't really step into that. But I listened the other things that irritated her. So we got through.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you can't coach. You can manage, you can get through, but you can't really tap into their gold. For some people, it's just
Yep.
Mm.
So what disruptive idea do you have that will change the coaching landscape in 2030?
I think this is part of my research as well, and I think it's and part of my experience of I didn't coach the men's team recently, the Swedish men's team, but even during my experience coaching the Australian men's team, it's really important to open nurturing and safe spaces for male athletes to openly express their emotions. And I think there's still an issue where men are expected to be really tough, boys and men are expected to be really tough in sport. And I think it's actually quite empowering for them to be able to express tears after a championships, for example, or to express love, or and I think that was partly why my coaching was appreciated, is because I offered something new, and martial arts are quite hard. You just close up your emotions and you be tough. Yeah. But I offered something new, but I don't think only women can do that. I think it's really important that men open up nurturing, safe, open spaces for male athletes to express their emotions.
Mm.
Mm.
Would that be considered responsible coaching? What do you mean by?
I think
that's
so.
one, as a topic. Let's go there next.
Yeah. So I think responsible coaching I think it's important for coaches to understand the power they have and the influence they can have in athletes' lives, and to take very good care of their emotions and the words that they use. I've witnessed coaches just being frustrated and not speaking very respectfully to athletes or managers and teams, and I understand it's in the heat of the moment. It can be very stressful being at a competition, but words last and they can scar. And I think as coaches, you can make mistakes, but it's really important. And this is part of responsible coaching, is that you acknowledge that you've made a mistake. But I think that's quite difficult for people in positions of power to acknowledge that they've made a mistake. But it's really, really important, because it can affect athletes' lives outside of their sport, confidence and things.
Yeah. So let's round off this episode focusing on something you're pretty passionate about with regards to gender-based discrimination and violence in Kendo and other martial art and combat sports through your research and leadership. How can we raise our game as coaches? How can we do a better job in this area? Kate, talk to us.
Yes, I think it's still such a big problem in sport, and it's silenced.
I agree.
Because of the power structure, and athletes' parents are so afraid to come forward, because opportunities can be taken away. And if athletes have invested their lives and parents have invested so much money, it's really difficult, but it's still such a big problem. Like what happened with USA gymnastics, it's just not gymnastics. I think it's in many, many sports. And it's in Kendo and many martial arts. And I think there's a culture of silence. So people don't talk about it or raise it, or if problems are raised, sometimes federations don't do anything about it because it's tricky. I mean, they have these wonderful membership protection policies in place, but they don't expect people to actually make a complaint. But I think it's really important for people in leadership positions to be very careful with the power they have and to be responsible and to be moral. And just because it's a martial art doesn't mean it's any different from anything else in society. There are much more, I think, systems in place that protect children and young people.
Yep.
And women. But I think the most important thing is that we speak out. And even if that means taking a risk, I think our silence doesn't protect us and it doesn't protect the future athletes. And it takes a lot of courage. But I think speaking out is the first step.
Mm. I love this line that I heard the other day with a coach who said, "I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you up." I think we speak out, we need to call each other up, and we need to hold each other at a high level of a standard so that if we see something as well as a coach that's not quite right, that we have the ability to, you know, as you say, advocate on behalf sometimes of those who don't. And this happens in the workplace as well. Of course, my audience is both business and sports coaches. So do you have any like practical tools or tips around how we can be more mindful of our, just like, let's start with our communication, our language. Is there any little things that coaches out there can do to do a better job or just to help call us up?
Yes. I think self-reflexivity is really important. And when you're talking to athletes, to actually see how they're reacting to you. Because, I mean, body language, I think sports people, coaches, athletes, we have such we can communicate through our bodies. It's also unspoken communication, and we can sense feelings in people, I believe, but maybe sometimes people choose not to, because I think the power imbalance between coaches and athletes, or in the workplace as well.
Yep.
One of the steps is to understand the power that you do have, and you have to be responsible with it, and you have to be ethical. So people don't know what ethics are. Well, what are my ethics? What are my values? How do I want to treat people? And I think as humans, we have a consciousness, we know. But I think self-reflexivity is very, very important. Because I think we know ourselves and we have to be honest with ourselves. But it's difficult. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And the other thing I've noticed when I've watched Kendo trainings before is that the actual coach is in the activities, whereas sometimes we see a lot of coaches standing on the sidelines. So that's another skill in itself, to be able to coach others as well as you're in the activity. How do you balance that?
I think a lot of coaches like to train at the same time, so they don't want to miss out on any training. I think you could probably see more from the outside if you coach, but I think when you're actually engaging with somebody, you can see, feel more. So I think you're able to coach more deeply when you're training with somebody than from the outside. But some coaches prefer to coach from the outside. But I think a mix is good. But often, when you're leading a session, you will pause and watch and see if people have understood the activity, if they're doing what you've suggested. If not, you maybe have to explain it in a different way. So there is that chance to pause and observe.
So speaking of being passionate, I mean, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, a 6th Dan. You mentioned no woman has got to 8th Dan in Kendo. can I ask, is that something that you strive for, or you have a mission to help other women get there? I mean, 6 Dan's amazing, by the way. I saw the training. I know what goes into years and years of just to get there is huge. My listeners out there, please note that is no easy feat. So congratulations. When did that happen, by the way?
2018, actually. Yeah. So I'm actually due for I can attempt my 7th Dan exam now, but I need to set a clear goal for that. I think I'll try next year. I wouldn't say fantasize, but I imagine myself attempting the 8th Dan exam.
Yeah.
So I think I will attempt it. And I think for me, it's through anything in life, through my competing, coaching, through my grading. If I'm able to self-actualize what ability I have, what I'm capable of, I think whatever level I get to, I'll be satisfied with that. Because I think that's my life goal. And I've been very fortunate that Kendo's provided a very clear pathway to work towards that. Because that's the beautiful thing about Kendo is you're never there. But of course, there is very strong, very clear steps that you feel like you're making progress.
Achieving, yeah. Continuous improvement is the motto, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And it's such an ancient martial arts too. I mean, good on you for just chipping away at supporting women and being an advocate for them to break down the myth barriers as well. So perhaps that would be a good one to finish on. I liked what you said earlier, that they sweat just as much, they invest just as much, they train just as hard. Any other ones that we want to add in there to round off this episode?
Well, I think women need to be taken just as seriously as male athletes and pushed. And on the other hand, men needed to be treated with more care.
Yep. We coexist for a reason. And and listen, Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know I've stayed on you to come on the show and given you plenty of space to say whenever you want to come on. I'm so grateful that you've found the time to be on this show. It's an important message to share with the world, and I appreciate you and everything that you do in the coaching space. So thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you for the opportunity, and I feel the same. I have a lot of respect for you as well. And thank you for all the tips. I have followed your posts, and they have actually really helped with my coaching, especially you can't cast your map onto somebody else. That was really very helpful.
Oh, see, sometimes I think no one reads them, but
I do.
I really appreciate that. I'll keep going. That's all we can do. Hey,
yes, exactly.
One thing resonates with somebody. Perhaps this episode has resonated with you, listeners out there. Please let us know. Leave us a comment. Leave us a rating, a review, and you can check out Kate's website below, as well as ksperspectives.com. And I know that I really appreciate your perspective. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy.